Everybody, and welcome to another video. Hope you guys are having an amazing day. Today I want to talk about the college football playoff rankings. They came out Tuesday. I don't know when. This should be coming out Wednesday. They came out yesterday, and I was gonna make this video, and I said, okay, I'm just gonna criticize. I'm gonna be a little nice with this, and then I actually saw the rankings, and I am pissed. These rankings are absolutely stupid. I don't. Well, I should always say these are based. This is based off my opinion. Obviously, these people have been around the game of football much longer than I have, longer than I've probably been alive. But from what I have seen this year, these rankings are absolutely atrocious. And I'm just gonna go ahead and start with in the order they did it from 25 to 1. And starting off at the bottom, Tulsa at 25th, that's fine. Iowa 24th, I guess that's okay. I don't have them in my personal rankings at top 25, but I am not upset with it. Oklahoma State at 23. This is my first bigger problem. I have them much higher. Well, not much higher. I have them higher in these rankings. Closer to 18th is about where I have them in my rankings. So quite a significant drop off. Anywhere from 18 to 20. I will make a video coming out probably Friday on my actual rankings. So yeah. Or maybe Thursday. Depends. Depends how I feel. But with my rankings, you'll see. But Ohio State, I think, is too low in this. Auburn, I'm okay. I'm fine with Auburn at 22. I probably would, just due to not necessarily their own fault, but due to teams above them, I would probably drop them to 23rd. But 22nd, I'm not upset with that. These next two are where I have much bigger problems. Marshall and Coastal Carolina at 21st and 20th, respectively. Yes, these are two group of 5 teams. But if they are a combined 15-0, which is better combined record than the 3 teams below them, and then 3 of the 4 teams below them, they've dominated. These 2 teams have just absolutely obliterated every single team they faced. And yes, it hasn't been the greatest of competitions. I guess Coastal Carolina didn't necessarily dominate Appalachian State, but that second half, they played so well. Like, that was one of their better games against a good team. They haven't been playing horrible competition. Like, they haven't been playing the Lobos. There we go. Okay, they've been playing solid competition, and they've destroyed them. So 21st and 20th, I think, is much too low. Much too low for these 2 teams, especially when you look at what just out of the blue, just knocking them all the way down. Because if you go and look at the AP posts, they've been constantly climbing and climbing. I think they made it up to 15th. I think in this last one they dropped to 16 and 17th. But still, this is much too low. Much too low to have these 2 teams. That is something I disagree with. These next 3, I also greatly disagree with. Well, maybe not greatly, but I disagree with. North Carolina should not be this high. North Carolina should not be the 19th best team in the country. They are not a top 20 team. They are barely sneak in to the top 25, in my opinion. Their defense just hasn't been top 20 caliber. Their offense, absolutely. Sam Howell and the running back core in North Carolina has been dominant. But the defense has not. It's been just about the exact opposite. Everything that UNC does on offense, the other team does. Like, their defense can't stop anyone, but they do have a chance to prove themselves this Friday, I believe, against Notre Dame. And I don't expect them to prove that they're a top 20 team. I expect them to get absolutely destroyed by Notre Dame and drop, in my opinion, drop out of the rankings, but probably for the college football playoff, drop down to the 23 to 25th. But this is much too high for Northern Carolina. Now USC, they fall in at 18th. I think this is fairly high. Yes, they are 3-0. But if you go and look at the games they've played and how much they've won by, these are horrible games. They're good games to watch. But for a team that's supposed to be top 20, absolutely not. Like, this is atrocious, I believe. This is just not good. Like, this, not just the rankings, but USC, they haven't played well. And I think they don't deserve to drop for their performances, but they should definitely not be ahead of Marshall and Coastal Carolina. Absolutely not. That has me a little upset. I wouldn't even have them above Oklahoma State, who the committee has at 23rd. Next, Texas at 17. Again, I think this is a bit too high. Mainly, the main problem I have with this is, again, it goes back to the Marshall and Coastal Carolina thing. I have those two teams as better than Texas. Those two teams should be ranked higher than Texas. And more specifically Texas and USC, the numbers themselves aren't too bad. It's just the teams they're ahead of, like Marshall, Auburn, or not Auburn, Marshall, Coastal Carolina, and even Oklahoma State for USC. And for those three teams, I believe should be ranked higher than Texas and USC. Now now Wisconsin at 16th. I am a Wisconsin fan. This is too high. We got our butts whooped by Northwestern. We scored 7 points. Yes, our defense was also amazing. They only scored 17. But it just felt like a blowout. We had 5 turnovers. Graham Mertz had his first 3 turnovers of his career. 16th is not where we should be. I will take it. But we should not be 16th. Again, I would have Marshall and Coastal Carolina ranked ahead of us. That is horrible, in my opinion. Next, Oregon. Way too low. This is the first team of a few that I believe are ranked way too low. Oregon, this is what I see. The inconsistencies in the playoff committee is horrendous. I mean, I'll get to another one fairly soon on, but with this, USC and Oregon, besides the fact that they're both Pac-12 teams, they're both 3-0. Neither team has played great competition. Okay, USC has squeaked out in just about every single one of their games. Oregon only had to squeak it out in their last game. Yet USC rises, Oregon falls. At least in terms of, like, in comparison to the AP poll. This is absolutely absurd. Okay, while Oregon, yes, did struggle, they should be, I believe, a top 10 team. I don't know exactly how I have these formulated, but I know I have Oregon 11th at worst, if not top 11th or 10th is where I have them. This is too low. I think Oregon deserves to be in that top 10, especially ahead of 1, 2, 3, 4 of maybe even 5 of these other teams. But I'll stick with 4 for now. Ahead of 4 of these other teams, and it's just, so yeah, I guess I'd have them at 11th then. Next, this is maybe the worst of all the rankings in this entire thing. BYU at 14th. This is absolutely insane. Again, with the consistencies. We see BYU at 14th. Okay, their main knock is their strength of schedule. In fact, that's their only knock, is they've only played one top 25 team, right? They played they played Boise State and obliterated them 51-17, if I'm not mistaken. At Boise State, yes, Boise State is having some quarterback issues, but still, 51-17. But if we go and look at Cincinnati, yes, they might have played slightly better teams, but not by much. Yes, they've played 3, I think, ranked teams or ranked caliber teams, and they get to stay up at 7th. Spoiler alert. Whereas BYU falls to 14th, from 8 to 14. Like, I just see no consistency here. And then if we go, like, I'm going to go ahead and say Iowa State's at 13. Why in the world is Iowa State ranked ahead of BYU? Yes, Iowa State just had a 45-0 shutout. But BYU, I think, nearly just won by 60 points. The consistencies are just, it's annoying. This is just insane. BYU is a top 8 team. Like, they could beat Cincinnati. They could beat Florida. I think they could beat Texas A&M. But I would keep them at 8th in the rankings for now, just because I don't know for sure. But, like, if you go and look, their only major knock is their strength of schedule. They are 9-0. Zach Wilson is a Heisman candidate, a legit Heisman candidate. Like, his stats are insane. BYU should not be 14th. Again, like Oregon, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 teams I'd rank ahead of them. Literally everyone ahead of them. Wait, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Almost everyone ahead of them. There's only 7 teams that I would rank ahead of them. BYU has been dominant. They do not deserve to be 14th. If I'm the BYU athletic director, yeah, you call up Washington, you get that game scheduled. You call up Cincinnati, you get that game scheduled. Okay, the absolute worst that can happen is you prove the playoff committee right. The absolute best that can happen, you go and you beat Washington. Okay, maybe Washington's not the greatest team, but it's a Pac-12 team. It's a Power 5 team, and it's not the worst of the Pac-12 teams. You go and you beat Washington. Okay, you probably raise a few spots. You schedule that game against Cincinnati, you win again. You're a playoff contender. Like, BYU, you need to. I'm sure they are. They got to go schedule some games because otherwise they have. I think they're done for a while. But BYU needs to schedule more games, and probably should have joined maybe even the Mountain West or Pac. They should have joined a conference, I believe, like Notre Dame did, and we see how well it's working out for Notre Dame. But moving on, Iowa State. This is an inconsistency, along with the fact that the BYU part. But Iowa State and Oklahoma, those teams are 13th and 11th. Oklahoma being 11th. When both teams are 6-2, okay. Both teams have struggled against good teams. Both teams have done well against good teams, and done really well against not good teams. So they've played each other once. Iowa State won. So wouldn't it make sense to have two seemingly even teams? Wouldn't it make sense to have the team that won in that matchup ahead? That makes sense to me. And like the College Football Playoff Committee has said, yes, we respect the head-to-head. Apparently not. I think this is a little high for Iowa State, generally. But I would say maybe by a spot or two. So it's not, the ranking itself is not far off. But the fact that Oklahoma is ahead of them, yes, Oklahoma is a fine team. But because Iowa State won in that head-to-head, Oklahoma should be behind Iowa State. And the inconsistency comes in the top 6. So I'll get to that in a second. Next, Indiana at 12. This is where the AP has them. I'm fine with it. I think I get why they're here. I get why they're 12th. They just lost to Ohio State. But to me, what that game proved against Ohio State, what that proved is that Indiana is a top 10 team. That game proved that Indiana is one of the best teams in the country. Yes, they struggled. They had their lapses. That pick 6 in the end, towards the end of the game, obviously really hurt us. They lost by 7. But they showed that Justin Fields is human. Going into that game, he had more He had more touchdowns than incompletions. But what does Indiana do? They intercept him 3 times. which for Justin Fields is an insane amount. Same with what Northwestern we'll get to. Their grammar is an insane amount. But yeah, I can understand that. Yes, they lost, but to me, it proved that they deserve to be ahead of 1, 2, 3, 4 other teams here. Well, maybe 3, maybe 4 other teams here. So I'm not a huge fan of this Indiana ranking, but I can understand this one. Like, that's the kind of criticism I had expected to give going into this. I was like, I get it. I may not agree, but I can understand. But for the most part, I disagree and I do not understand. But this one, I disagree, but I can understand it. 11th, Oklahoma. I mentioned they were 11th. They should be below Iowa State. Whether that's 1 spot behind or 10 spots behind, they should be behind Iowa State. There's no reason Oklahoma should be ahead of Iowa State. I get that they destroyed Oklahoma State. Okay? But there's just no reason, especially when you get up to this top 6 matchup that I'm going to get to. There's no conceivable thought that should put Oklahoma ahead of Iowa State. Yes, like I mentioned, Oklahoma destroyed Oklahoma State. But in the same week, Iowa State had a 45-point shutout against a pretty good a decent Kansas State team. Like, not Kansas State. A 4-3, like a bowl game caliber team, like a solid team. They'll get into a bowl game, I believe. Iowa State shut them out. I don't care, like, if that was against Kansas, that's still impressive. But yeah, I do believe Iowa State should be ranked ahead of Oklahoma. I do have them only 1 spot ahead of Oklahoma because of that win. But I do genuinely believe that Iowa State is the better team, and if they played again, Iowa State would win again. Now here we are in the top 10. At number 10, Miami. I don't like this ranking, but this is one I can understand. Miami's been on the fringe of the top 10 according to the AP basically the entire year. But they've struggled. Miami has struggled against inferior competition. Specifically, the game that comes to mind is that Virginia game. They won, but not by enough. That game was that game did not. I think that game in itself ruined Miami's chances at getting into the college football playoff because that was such a horrible game. And then you go a week later, as I've pulled up their schedule, so that's how I suddenly remembered. They go a week later against NC State, and they barely win. The next week, they play Virginia Tech, and they win by 1. Okay, Miami has struggled, and they lost mightily to Clemson. That was so really, yeah, because of the loss to Clemson knocked them out. They lost 42-17. That was probably the end of Miami's playoff hopes. But they did not do themselves any favors in these last 4 games, beating Pitt by 12, which is 2 scores, but still not as much as you would want to see a top 10 team beat Pitt by. Virginia by 5, not good. NC State by 3, again, not what you want to see a top 10 team beat NC State by. And Virginia Tech by 1. This one's slightly more acceptable as Virginia Tech is a better team. Still not acceptable. This has just been a shaky year for Miami. Yes, they have pulled out 7 wins, but they've just been 7 shaky wins, and then that one huge loss to Clemson. Now, this is probably the ranking I have the second most problem with. Number 9, Georgia. When you look at Georgia's schedule and who they've played and how well they've done, you won't really find too much wrong with what their schedule looks like, and just their 2 losses came to good teams. They lost to Alabama, they lost to Florida. But when you look at it a little bit deeper. So I'll take these 3 games in particular, 2 losses and their game in between. The game against Alabama, you can't hold that one against them too much, except for the fact that they were up. Let me pull it up. Hurry up. I don't think I can find it. That's what I'm looking at. They were up in the first half. They were destroying in the first half. It looked like Georgia was the number 1 team in the country. But Alabama proved why Alabama is and Georgia is not. They came back and won by 17. Alabama destroyed that second half. So Georgia, which I was fine with, only dropped to 3rd or 4th, whatever it was. Next week, they go into Kentucky, and they win by 11. Keep in mind, this is a 2-4 currently Kentucky Wildcats team, and Georgia won by 11. The rushing defense in that game was basically non-existent. Chris Rodriguez from Kentucky, 108 yards. But they had the bend don't break. They allowed no touchdowns. But then finally we'll get to it because this next Florida game kind of relates to what I'm about to bring up. Against Florida, they were just destroyed. Florida just ate. Florida had bulldog for lunch. That's basically what it's like. Kyle Trask, 474 yards, the most in his career, 4 touchdowns and 1 interception. 474 yards, and this is not against a Georgia team with a bad defense. That's just the main selling point of this Georgia team. Was their defense. The matchup going into this game was Florida's high-powered offense versus Georgia's defense. Obviously, Florida's offense won. And if this came to the fact that Georgia's defense did not show up, Florida was going to dominate, and they did. Florida, I think, should have been favored in this game because the fact that while they do have a shaky offense, their rushing defense, they have a shaky defense. Their rushing is Zamir White, 7 carries, 107 yards. I think that one of those included a 75-yard touchdown run. But Florida's defense isn't great. But Georgia quarterbacks combined 9 of 29, 112 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 3 INTs. Georgia just has looked awful. And as I mentioned, that's against a defense that is not good. It's not a great not a high caliber defense that we see with Alabama, Clemson, even Ohio State, A&M, Cincinnati, Northwestern. Florida's defense does not compare to these other top 10 teams. But they were good enough to destroy Georgia, and that's one reason why I believe Georgia should be around 15th. Next, Northwestern. This is one where I'm back on, I disagree, but I can understand it. Northwestern is 5-0. They are the leaders in the Big Ten West, I believe. Let me think. Big Ten East. Sorry, I forgot what a map looks like. Big Ten East, and after their destruction of Wisconsin, yes, it was only a 10-point loss, but in a game where only 24 points were scored, it is a destruction. That was going in. We knew it was going to be a defensive shootout. That's a great choice of words there. A defensive showdown, and Northwestern came out on top. And the main thing here was Northwestern could get turnovers. Let's see if I can find their actual stats for their turnovers. But against Wisconsin, who looked pretty unstoppable, if I dare say, Wisconsin looked unstoppable, mainly because of the fact they had a quarterback now. That was the thing that made them look unstoppable. was the fact that Wisconsin now had Graham Mertz, who had 2 amazing days. So, but Northwestern made him look human. Like they made Graham Mertz look like a 2-star quarterback. But yeah, just going through these other games, Northwestern has forced 7, 8, currently 8 interceptions through. No, I'm sure it's more. 11 interceptions in 5 games. That's just over 2 a game. Northwestern is a good team, and I have them just outside my top 10. I think 11 was a fine spot for them. However, I do think Indiana is a better team than Northwestern, but this is one I can fully understand why Northwestern is a top 8 team. And now these top 7 are fairly straightforward. There's only one minor discrepancy I have with it. Cincinnati at 7, that's exactly where I have them. Cincinnati is a serious contender for the playoffs. And they could also very well benefit from a BYU game. But yeah, a solid contender for the playoffs. I'm fine with that. Luke Fickell, great coach. Florida. So when I was talking about Oklahoma, Iowa State, and that inconsistency, this is where that inconsistency stems from. Florida, led by maybe Heisman favorite Kyle Trask, are 6-1 and have dominated. They just outside of their one loss to who did they lose to? To Texas A&M. Shoot, I am out. If you like their first 2 games, shutouts. They won 45 and 38 2-0. Then they beat Mississippi State. Oh wait, no, that was last year. My apologies. I can read dates. So yeah, first game of the year they handle Ole Miss pretty well. South Carolina take care of business. Texas A&M they only lost by 3, so not bad. They go out and destroy Missouri. They go out and destroy Georgia. They destroy Arkansas. One of 2 problems I've had with this Florida season was their win against Vanderbilt. If you don't know, Vanderbilt is 0-7, and if you go and look at how Vanderbilt's done, they lost to Kentucky by 3, not bad. Mississippi State by 7, not horrible. Got their butts whooped by Ole Miss. Got their butts whooped by South Carolina. Got their butts whooped by a struggling LSU team. Apparently Vanderbilt does well against good teams because Texas A&M only beat them by 5. Huh. That's interesting. But yeah, this is like the only main this is the main problem I have with Florida. And as I was talking about their defense, when I was talking about Georgia, I talked about Florida's shaky defense. Ken Seals. I am sure you've never heard of his name, as this is the first time I am hearing of his name. Vanderbilt quarterback. 22 of 34 and 319 yards for 200 touchdowns and only 1 interception. Ken Seals is not a good quarterback. I mean, let me pull up just a random game. Let me pull up this Texas A&M game because that's the most comparable game. Ken Seals, 150 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions. Against LSU, Ken Seals, 113 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions. Ken Seals should not be putting up 319 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 1 interception against a top 5 team like that. Yes, Florida did win 38-17. This was not a good win, but specifically their game against Texas A&M, A&M has the head-to-head advantage. So I fully agree that A&M should be ahead of Florida, and I agree Iowa State should be ahead of Oklahoma. Next, Texas A&M, their only flaws. They also have 2 flaws. Like Florida has 2 flaws. Their just 2 flaws are not as bad in my opinion. Their 1 loss came to Alabama. Fair enough. Everybody loses to Alabama except for last year. But their game against Vanderbilt was not good. I think I will give them the excuse that it was the first game of the year. They only did win by 5. So I do think While Florida did win by 21 against Vanderbilt, they did lose to A&M. So that first should give A&M the advantage, and then A&M's one loss came to a much superior team. So this is where I have my final minor discrepancy. Ohio State at 4. The committee has the top four teams right, and that's really all I can ask for them. That's all I should hope from them at this point, as they can understand who the 4 best teams in college football are. But I personally think that Ohio State should be ranked ahead of Clemson. I'm not going to say that Clemson is Ohio State is a better team or Clemson is a worse team. But the one thing is, Ohio State has no losses. Clemson has one. That's the main thing that separates them here. But I get it. And I think if Ohio State and Clemson, if Clemson had played, Ohio State might have fallen to 4 and Clemson rose up to 3rd just because they were playing Florida State, would have gotten destroyed. But Florida State got a little scared of a certain long blonde-haired male who wears the number 16, as I would be too. But yeah, this is fine. Clemson at 3, Ohio State at 4. It'll work itself out. And one way that'll work itself out is the ACC championship game, where more than likely Clemson will play Notre Dame. I personally am hoping for a Notre Dame win again, solely for the fact that a team like maybe Cincinnati or BYU, well, BYU's not getting in at this point, for a team like Texas A&M, or specifically Cincinnati. Cincinnati is the team I want to see into the playoffs. But yeah, this will work itself out. I think if Clemson does win that game, as I expect they will, I would expect the top 4 to be Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, and Notre Dame. That would be my expected top 4. But if Notre Dame wins, as of right now, I'd expect that to be Notre Dame might be. I know it'd probably be Alabama 1, Notre Dame 2, Ohio State 3, and as of right now, I would say Texas A&M 4, mainly because Florida would have lost to Alabama in the championship game. But that's besides the point. Notre Dame falls in at number 2 and Alabama at 1. Perfect. Those are, in my opinion, I think the committee only got 5 spots really right. But yeah, as I mentioned, I will be dropping my rankings video either tomorrow or more than likely tomorrow. It'll be tomorrow. It will be tomorrow. I will drop a rankings video tomorrow with my opinions. And I hope you all have an amazing Thanksgiving. I will see you all later. Adios.